Samadhi, wisdom, and powers of liberation, right? Okay. Initial verse. The Buddha poured the great Dharma of one vehicle that transports all to safe, stable, and joyful refuge. Okay. Of the safe from samsara, stable, non-retreating, and joyful refuge. And this joyful part of it, it's not the worldly joy that we have, because worldly joy is it's actually like a moment between two moments of unhappiness, because that is in the truth of suffering. So this is all about transporting all, meaning liberation from the shore of samsara. So it leads sentient beings to practice according to the teachings. According to teachings, which is the Dharma, of course, uphold the great Dharma and walk the Bodhisattva path. So walk the Bodhisattva path, it's the only path that reaches the door of Buddhahood, which is the supreme enlightenment, and that's what is the whole Lotus Sutra is about. So in the obviously they in, as you know, that in the Buddhist path, there's the Theravada path or Hinayana, then there's a Mahayana and Vajrayana. So it's in the Mahayana path and in the Vajrayana path that we walk the Bodhisattva path, and this is where we are. And obviously in the Tzu Chi lineage, we walk the Bodhisattva path to the Lotus Sutra. So Master's explanation. Many young people nowadays are intellectuals or entrepreneurs. They are very busy and they honestly listen to the Dharma. So it is not the middle age and the elderly. So when I took this line, when I reflect back in my early days, my interest or my interest to seek the Dharma. I started when I was 16 or 17 years old. I was actually in school at that time. But obviously that didn't get very far when I went to UK to study at the age of 17. And but my mother gave me a prayer to chant, and so in times of need, I would chant a mantra. And so I went on to those years. But interestingly, during those early years, they were interesting. You just do that without any expectation and without doing any, and all you have is only a sincere prayer. And somewhat, you give you the calmness. But I never had a chance to really listen to the Dharma, except that very basic Dharma when I listened when I was in my teenager. But I think when my son came back to start to work, and I said it's about time for me to learn a bit more, and that's how I started. So spiritual practice and listening to the Dharma are not only for people who have time. This is not the case. Now, this is obviously very true. The problem, I think, for youngsters pursuing the career, they have to battle between the demand for the time in the course of the career, and obviously, and having to have time to do that. So, and the only time I had was obviously after work, and very often in my early days I stayed very late, so I didn't really have hardly any time to do that. But obviously, as you go more and more senior, you have a better control of your time, and you then seek to listen to the Dharma. But the point is this: I think I remember that I was listening to one master about having time to listen to Dharma, and he actually said this. Let's say the problem I think about time, he used the word laziness, which is actually indolence, right? And when it's very easy to say that we don't have the time for the Dharma because I've got all these things to do. But if one were to put the mind to seek the Dharma, there will be time. And this is all about sincerity to seek the path. And that even I started to share a little bit, very basic Dharma that I know. Even in Siaramas, when I started them some years back, there were hardly any traction. And even that is some of them, it's not about time. It's a lot of things to hold them back. And so therefore, obviously there are people and all the places that you go, I'm sure you see that there are a lot of youngsters, and especially the Buddhist youth. And some of them are very active, and you can see them in Tzu Chi as well. But the people who are doing this, obviously, they are not many. And there's a lot of hindrances within ourselves we have to conquer. And it's not about age. And this is something that when you want to seek the Dharma, there will be a lot of hindrances you will face. And that's the reason why it's been said that Dharma is meant for those who seek. And Buddhists, you don't see Buddhists going around converting others. And so therefore, imagine when you learn the Dharma, or you start learning about suffering. So it's not something that people would go in there and learn about suffering. Okay, so therefore you want got to have the affinity to seek the Dharma. So business leaders need to listen to the Dharma even more. The Dharma can help them to find a way to open up their hearts and minds, run their business better, understand their purpose in running a business. Now, so must I say, business leaders need to listen to Dharma even more. Right? But more often than not, like our Sister Moon said, it's not that easy because again, they say I don't have time to do that. And well, there's no time, it only 24 hours a day, then try to allocate time. And it was something that I struggled with in my early days. And at the time I was already in my 20s, I was struggling to find the time, and you're sort of building up your career and you need the time to listen to the Dharma. And more often than not, after work, and you're going to rush over and you say, oh gosh, I haven't had my dinner, and I went and had my dinner, and it was traffic jam, and then it's cloudy, it's going to rain. And so you got 101 excuse that you had to battle within yourself until you pluck the courage and the strength to go ahead. Is very difficult to conquer that. And obviously, the way the world works is success is measured by your material attainments. So therefore, that's how one would be awarded, whether awarded with titles, awarded with positions, awarded with recognition in the world. And that is what material fortune is about. And so when you live in the world and you have all these accolades given to you, obviously it's very easy to get, I've used the word mesmerized or hypnotized by all this recognition. But if you then understand the Dharma, then you realize that these are just externality of conditions. Right? So before and when the arising of the desire and emotion here is very much about our ego, and we get consumed by that. And so when we get consumed by that, we dance to the worldly tunes. So when we dance the worldly tunes, we'll be hypnotized. Our life will go in accord with what the world wants you to do, not in accord what you should be doing. And because we don't know, because we're deluded, we are ignorant of what's going on. So as a result of which, our mind, so-called, is possessed by the worldly conventions. So when you understand the Dharma, that's why they call the awakened ones. They're awakened to their own mind so that they are no longer being possessed. So they take possession of their own minds. And this is good. I think during the process of doing that, one is then very focused in spiritual fortune instead of material fortune. So this spiritual fortune is one that you grow from lifetime to lifetime. Material fortune is only this lifetime, because at the end of it, we came to this world naked and without nothing. We will die without nothing and nothing being with us. So this material fortune that we get in this life will be completely gone at the end of life. But spiritual fortune, what is this spiritual fortune that you, well, the spiritual fortune you brought in this life is the affinity that you have in the path, and also to learn from the master. So this spiritual fortune you will bring forward to your future life to continue in your practice. And what holds this spiritual fortune is your aspiration to seek the truth. And this aspiration to seek the truth is not going to end in this life. So that's a major difference. So Dharma can be introduced at a young age and can be explained in pictures, just like young children can draw what they understand, as Master explained in the example. So children have very powerful minds, can accept the Dharma deeply. So why is it that, obviously that's why you have Sunday Dharma school, and I used to send my children to this Sunday school in Bandar Utama. And obviously until today, sometimes when I, in the course of speaking and things like that, and they will come and tell me, Dad, are you upholding your precepts? So and as well as my daughter, and she will remind me. So this, you see, the young minds, they are not contaminated by the worldly ways. That's the difference. And so they're very innocent, and so they absorb things like a sponge. But what happens is that when we start growing and we start climbing the corporate ladder, in both position, in both wealth and power, we lose that because we get consumed by what the world wants us to do. So that's so when you're in that state, we need to take ourselves out. We need to be awakened from that slumber. And so this is what we need to seek liberation. So the powers of liberation, aside from paying our respects to the Buddhas, it must also praise the powers of liberation, samadhi, wisdom, and the Dhamma. So samadhi and wisdom, as you understand, two of the flawless studies, and also within 6 parameters, right? So which is giving or generosity, morality or precepts, patience, diligence or perseverance, samadhi or meditation, and then obviously you've got wisdom within the 6 parameters. And so when why is it that, but then why do we need to praise? And I often ask myself, why do you need to praise? They don't need our praise. I mean, for the Buddhas, they don't need our praise. The difference is when we praise the powers, it's us who is embracing those powers, it's us who is giving respect to those powers. And that is what we should be emulating in our aspirational vows when we do that. So what are these powers? The Buddha said he had infinite, unlimited wisdom, power, and fearlessness. So obviously we understand this infinite wisdom and unlimited wisdom. And this is what, because it's vast as the universe, is nothing that he does not know. And the power is not the magical power. It's the power of liberation. And so if we look at the power, in respect to the power of the Buddha, and the Buddha was here more than 2,500 years ago. And what is the power that still remains? The power in the Dharma, which is still remain until today. And here we are still embracing that. And more than 2,500 years ago, we are still trying to discern how we can be enlightened, how one can be able to have that Dharma and be able to reach across throughout the world until today. And fearlessness is about able to have the courage and the strength to conquer whatever hindrances and the maras that within us. And just like the Buddha did when he attained enlightenment, he was being challenged by the King Mara. And when he was challenged by the King Mara, and he was, the Mara asked him, what is that? He claimed that he was still been enlightened, Buddha has been enlightened, and so Mara challenged him and asked him what proof he has to say that he was enlightened. And that's when the Buddha used his right hand fingers and pointing up to the ground of the earth. And that signifies that earth is my witness. And the Buddha has been here countless of times in the past. And he went through all this fearlessness, and this fearlessness is about the cultivation that one is without self, which is selfless. When one is selfless, one is fearless. And so this went on from all the stories that you heard from Master, from the past manifestation of the Bodhisattva, then the Buddha was here. And so obviously all this previous lifetime, innumerable lifetime, he had already established a lot of innumerable affinities. And that's the reason why the Buddha pointed the fingers down and said, earth is my witness. He was walking on this path. The earth knows that he's enlightened. It's not but he said that he was enlightened. Heaven and earth knows about that. So the Buddha sees all sentient beings as his children with sense of closeness and love. And he said, they are like Rahula. This was his heartfelt effort for sentient beings. And so this was, they are like Rahula. And this is also one of the teachings that I have learned. It said that when you cultivate a great loving heart, treat everyone as your only child. And that's exactly what the Buddha is saying, because Rahula is the only child of the Buddha. So, and this been resonating in the teachings until today. So you want to, how would you treat your only child? And that's the mindset we should be having when we deal with sentient beings. So when we come to the teaching, the Buddha gave the great vehicle equally. These are the powers of liberation. And so we place a power of liberation, and this is the teaching of the Dharma. So with an impartial mindset, he treated all sentient beings as his only son. Until today, right? So the Dharma is still available until today. So the sutra is a path, and this path is a road to walk on. If we get caught up in the text, our legs will never grow in strength. You know, I like this line because that's why I took it out. If we get caught up in the text, our legs will never grow in strength. Even when we go up on the path, we grow in our spiritual progress. We must not be caught in a text. You know, very often that sometimes when we read a certain text, we get very stuck to that text. It's okay to understand the text and get realization from the text. Remember, I once said that the Master has pointed us the way. Do not get stuck with a finger that points the way. And because if we do that, we'll remain stationary and we'll never grow in strength, because how can we grow in strength when we remain where we are? So therefore, even in the spiritual cultivation, one can get spiritual attachment. And so we need to understand about spiritual growth. And spiritual growth is about self-growth and self-development. So the lessons learned. The great vehicle Dharma teaches samadhi, wisdom, powers of liberation. So with the Buddha's wisdom, the workings of the world that he realized could be suitably applied to help eliminate our ignorance and afflictions. And this is what the whole practice is about. And because we are ignorant in our own little ways, as I explained earlier, we are stuck in how the way the world wants us to behave. And I just mentioned to you about how the world measures our success. And the Buddha was born as a prince. He could have become a powerful king, but that's what the world sees it. But his mind he was an awakened being because he was already a bodhisattva. So he was never afflicted by worldly attractions. So the Dharma water can extinguish the spark that may set a house on fire. So how then we have sparks sparkling all the time within us. That's the reason why I mentioned to you all, when you got to elevate the consciousness beyond the mind. And two things. One is within you, okay? That is your awareness within yourself. What is the spark that can easily come up within yourself? Your thoughts. The thought is the spark. If there is a spark that arises, and especially as the spark here is an unwholesome spark, and you can burn into a rage. So there is consciousness of awareness. The other part is the consciousness of mindfulness between you and another person. So it's being mindful of what you say, mindful of your words, mindful of your actions. So the Buddha taught one Dharma vehicle. It used this great vehicle to transport us sentient beings, transporting us, like I said earlier, to liberation from the shore of samsara to the shore of enlightenment. And this is what the Buddha's loving kindness are treating us as the only child. And this is what we should be emulating in our practice. So we sentient beings must practice according to the teachings, earnestly uphold the great Dharma, and walk the bodhisattva path. These are the methods we regularly use, and walk the bodhisattva path. And see, the big difference of bodhisattva path compared to the other vehicle is that we're walking the path of non-self, right? Because we were putting the interests of others ahead of ours. And when you put the interest ahead of ours, you're cultivating, you're walking a path of benevolence, a path of selflessness. So when you're following the path of selflessness, naturally the courage and the strength or the fearlessness will grow in us. But obviously, it's not easy, but this is the many lifetimes of practice. So in contemplation, now today I don't have any, I give you quite different, because I pick up, trying to relate back to today's teaching about this liberation. So I'll give you a few points of pondering, okay? So something for you to ponder. And I think I've got 3 points in here, very short pondering points. See, happiness without knowing sorrow comes from the joy of liberation from suffering. Now, happiness are all worldly feeling, and we go through cycles in the worldly ways, right? So we get something we want, become very happy, we are elated. But when that something we got, we already got it. So our expectation has already been met. So no more. So the happiness will go, because that happiness, the worldly happiness, is depending upon satisfaction of our expectation. So if you are in business, you reach your business target, you exceed your business target, great. You're happy. So what do you do next? You raise your target higher. And so the anxiety will follow. problems will come, then unhappiness will come in. And then you meet your target and happiness comes in. So it will be a never-ending flux of our desire emotion. But happiness without knowing sorrow, where can that be? And this is what moving away from the worldly happiness. And they come from the joy of liberation from suffering. So when there is no suffering, how can there be unhappiness? So that's the part that we need to understand. But the problem is we are afflicted to the cause of suffering. We are attached to worldly desires. And that's one that is very not easy for a lot of people to understand, but you understand now. The journey to enlightenment begins with the heart to liberate the mind. And this is something that I've shared with you all in the past. It's easier, you see, the mind, obviously, first of all, the mind needs to open a little gap to allow you to listen, okay? But a lot of people doesn't even want to open the little gap to listen. But there's something that moves everybody's heart, and that is virtues and compassion. And most people, because even no matter how bad a person is, there's still a little love for someone, love for the child, or love for the parents, or whatever the case may be. So there's still a little love. So therefore, you can open the door of the heart ajar and cultivate those virtues. Because when we do that, our mind will become open wider and wider. And then you'll be convinced. I'm sure you have a lot of stories in Tzu Chi. Brother Lim, for example, is one. So there's a lot of stories about this. And that's a reason why cultivation of virtues, but cultivation of virtues is the one that develops the heart, the virtuous heart, the great loving heart. But we cannot stop there, because compassion alone is not going to liberate you. Wisdom will. But wisdom cannot grow unless you have virtues. So actually, if you don't understand that and you contemplate on this, you will realize that wisdom arises from virtues. Okay? With virtues, you grow you in wisdom. So, but you cannot be stuck in the text that Master said. We need to grow beyond that. And this is where you need to learn about realization. So one must lift the anchor of samsara up to be liberated. But many of us hear about this, we know about this, we are not willing to do it. So why? Because we're stuck to our own desire in this world. So on relationship, on liberating relationship, not forgiving someone for a mistake will lead not to forgive the next person, isn't it? Because you see, sometimes we have this relationship that come to us and easy, and it can be a good relationship, a bad relationship, we are not willing to forgive. So someone may make a mistake and may hurt us, and if I do not forgive one person, I will not forgive the next person, and so on, and many more persons that can only bring forth hatred and anger in you that darkens your world. I have come across in the path of practice people who actually very earnestly seeking the Dharma. The only one problem, and find that most of the time the hindrance comes from being unable to forgive. So we need to try forgiving. You see, whether you are trying to forgive the person, but whether the person forgive you or not, that's irrelevant. Okay, just like Devadatta and the Buddha. Okay, the important point is on your side to forgive. Forgive comes from the word, actually two words, for and give, right? For means you go ahead first and you give. So forgiving is actually part of cultivation of generosity, except that you give first. So try forgiving and you feel how liberating and joyous it can be. So become one joyous it can be, because you want to have the Dharma joy. and you want to understand what it is in practice, you have to forgive. And it's only then you will not be afflicted by anything you're grasping to, any hurt that you may be clinging on to. So just forgive. Okay, Gan En, brothers and sisters, that's all I have. So, 恭喜发财, Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brother Chin. A round of brilliant sharing.